Welcome to another edition of Through My Lens. I'm your host, Karen Jackson, and today is a special day. We are kicking off our Men Making Moves series, and this is our opportunity to highlight, to celebrate men who are making a difference, not only in their lives, but in the lives of others and in the lives of throughout our community and throughout the world. And so today we have been highlighting some local Daytonians. As if you cannot tell, we have men who are making moves. So I am so honored to have another guest with me today, Mr. Peter Benkendorf. He is the founder of Involvement of Advocacy. And so that should tell you a whole lot. He is a big advocate for others, but also for making a difference in our community. So, Peter, I'm so glad to have you here as a special guest today.
Karen, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on with you and to talk to your viewing audience. I'm excited to share a little bit of the work that I'm doing and what I see others, men and women out in the community doing to make Dayton a better place.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what is involvement of advocacy.
Sure. So I founded Involvement Advocacy in 1992 in Chicago. And its purpose really at the time was to give residents and citizens the frameworks and the tools that they need to address systemic issues that face them in their communities. And it really kind of grew out of how I was raised by my parents to have a strong social conscience and really taking interest in our shared humanity. And our first project, which really started in the fall of 1992 and is something that has really impacted my life since that time, is a project called Sister Neighborhoods. And through Sister Neighborhoods, I brought together residents of Cabrini Green, which is a fairly notorious or infamous public housing community right in downtown Chicago, and residents of Winnetka, which is a North Shore suburb, kind of like Oakwood, only Oakwood here, because it being Chicago. And it was really a special experience for me, bringing together people that, for most folks in Chicago, they really wondered, what do people in Cabrini Green and Winnetka have in common? Those are very disparate sorts of communities. And my answer would always be the same. Other than their shared humanity, probably not much. But in our shared humanity is really where we find everything. And so I happened to meet two extraordinary women. Interestingly enough, a lot of the work I do is with women. I seem to relate to that better, maybe less ego and more goodness in their hearts. But I met these two absolutely extraordinary women, Henrietta Thompson, 28, spent her entire life in public housing. Just this wonderfully articulate, passionate, caring person, who at the same time fit a lot of the stereotypes you might find in public housing. And Cynthia Gary, who was in her mid-40s, master's degree in urban ethnography, highly educated, living the good life in the North Shore, but I would describe her somewhat of a 60s flower child, which is maybe a little bit unusual. But I ended up getting these two women together for the first time. I picked Henrietta up one morning in Cabrini Green, and we drove up to Winnetka. And I was like a fly on the wall listening to these two women tell their stories. It was really fascinating. And turned out they had a lot in common. And at one point in the conversation, Cynthia Gary from Winnetka started talking about how she and some women friends were feeling misunderstood. And you're thinking, how well-to-do white women from the suburbs be misunderstood? What's wrong? What's up with that? I mean, it never even occurred to me, frankly. And so she said, yeah, we everybody thinks we're CEO wives and junior leaguers, and we spend the day shopping and playing tennis and doing all those things that you would expect suburban women to do. And she said, we wanted to tell a different side of life in Winnetka. So three of us women got together to start a community newspaper. At which point Henrietta blurts out, we're not all gangbangers, welfare queens, and drug addicts. We need a community newspaper in Cabrini Green. And basically at that moment, Voices of Cabrini was born, which for 4 years, starting in early 1993, was the only resident-run community newspaper in Chicago public housing. And that's really how I got started doing the work that I'm still doing today, to be able to have conversations that the people in the room want to have, to be able to connect them in authentic ways, to allow people to be their authentic selves, and then figure out how do we lift each other up to make the world a better place, or in this case, how do we build a better Dayton? And that's really what motivates my work here. I've been here for 13 and a half years. I had an epiphany. Actually, I'd been drinking a few glasses of wine in April of 2007, and here in Dayton, our daughter had come to UD, and I decided that I needed to come to Dayton, Ohio. And I happened to be living about 50 miles outside of Chicago, and I missed being urban and being in the city. And so started networking, and I've been here since January 1st, 2009. I brought with me a international summer artist residency and youth collaborative called Blue Sky Project, which we ran for about 3 years. And then my work really got back to my roots, and we opened up the Collaboratory, which I've been operating since 2012. We're currently located in Talbot Tower, but previously we're at Courthouse Square for about 7.5 years. And the Collaboratory is an interesting place. It is sort of part think tank, part R&D department, part social enterprise incubator, but it's a place where Daytonians of all walks of life, dreamers and doers, can gather to move innovative ideas to transformational action. So we've been involved in lots of different things. We started the Dayton Sewing Collaborative, which is now an independent nonprofit organization. We've done a lot of work with incarcerated, formerly incarcerated. We have an initiative called X Factor, which is a citizen service corps made up of formerly incarcerated individuals who are looking to, one, do good work in the community, but also trying to change how the community sees ex-offenders. And we're actually working on a new project called Another Chance Initiative, which is all about working with women who are currently incarcerated pre-release at Dayton Correctional Institute. So we're involved in lots of different kinds of things. We've worked on a project called FNOSH, which features community dinners at different immigrant-owned restaurants. We organize Dayton Porch Fest. But mostly we're really here as a place that people can bring their community ideas, and we can figure out how do we help them take their ideas and move them into action. And then our other initiative, and Karen, that's how you and I met, was something we started a couple of years ago called Reimagining America, Dayton, Ohio. And that was born out of the Frontline ProPublica documentary that ran in September of 2018 that featured Dayton as a manifest example of what has happened to too many great American cities and the people who live there as a result of our current socioeconomic model. They've been left behind, or in many cases left out. And that really got us begging the question, and that was what the conversation we met is, how do we build a community of well-being? How do we create a community of well-being that ultimately transcends systemic racism and economic injustice, and that where we do value our mutuality, our shared humanity, and really start that process of co-creation? I think we're having some really powerful and authentic conversations that we feel are different than any of the kinds of conversations that typically go on in this community, because they don't really come with a specific agenda, but it's really to allow people to kind of share their stories and what's working for them and what could be better, and what does well-meaning be to them, and then how can we really improve the quality of life, if it's access to housing, to transportation, to healthcare. How can we have more equity in education? Those are really the pressing issues that people want to find answers to, and no one's coming here to save us, and it's not going to be the institutions that are going to fix it for us. It's really about citizens coming together and figuring out how do we determine what it is that we want, and then how do we make it happen. And so I'm just excited to be able to share the work we're doing with your listeners, and invite them to get involved with what we're all about, which is trying to figure out how to make things better in our community. That's my story.
So there's so much there. I'm sure we will have to bring you back again for a part 2. Okay. But Peter, I do want to talk to you about your Reimagine America project, what you mentioned, which is how we met. What is one of the things that has surprised you the most in talking to different people from different walks of life about what do they even think about the initiative? And
I think that we are reaching people that are looking for a different approach, that are looking for a different way to find the answers. I think there's a lot of frustration, and people are looking for an outlet.
Mhm.
One, to be themselves and to meet other people who share their concerns. I think that certainly the pandemic laid bare for a lot more people to maybe realize that what kind of fragile state they're in, financially, emotionally, physically. And I think it's taken a toll on a lot of people. And there's lots of wonderful things about this country, but when you see how many people are feeling traumatized or feeling stressed out or worried that, one bad thing that happens to me, the inadequacies of our healthcare system have put too many of us on edge. And this is no way to run a country, or a society when, again, you have so many haves and have-nots. When people are working two jobs and are just trying to maintain their existence. We should all be demanding better. And I think that as citizens, we've allowed ourselves to give up our voices, and we've come to accept things that the way they are, and they're always going to have to be that way. And people have to take the power back. I mean, I think that's really, and it's not really about where you are on the political spectrum, but why shouldn't the people be in charge of the way things should be? And I think that's what we're hearing from a lot of folks, is they're looking for a new way to kind of create these assets. I mean, I think one of the great examples in our community is is to see the Gem City Market finally open, and to see that kind of community ownership and the development of a solidarity economy. But what if we had a community-owned health plan? What if there was more universal health care for everybody? And we're really watching out for one another in a very different sort of way. And I think that's what we're hearing from folks, is they're looking for a different path.
And I think it's so important what you mentioned, because I think the racial climate in the community, not just here in Dayton, I mean, we certainly have had our challenges, but I think it has just brought people from different walks of life together to kind of, let's take down the barriers that may divide us, and how we can work together to solve the problems, and how we, like you said, we the people, how we can work together to solve the problems. And I think the more we can come together to collectively, I think we're going to continue to have a winning situation.
I think that, I mean, there's an interesting tension at play here, Karen, because, and we talk about this a lot with our collaborators, and we're from all around the community, and there's, I mean, in some ways there's a need to have truth and reconciliation in our country, the way that the South Africans did, and in 2015, the Canadians also went through a major truth and reconciliation process regarding their treatment of the First Nations people. And I'm not sure if we can ever get there. And at the same time, though, this is really about imagining the kind of future that we all want to have. And so there's sort of a tension between how much time do we spend looking backwards versus how much time do we really invest in creating this community of well-being. And we're using community well-being as our framework, in part because we can measure well-being. And so a big part of the work here is to change how we define and measure success in our community. Today, in our country and our communities, we generally measure success around economic terms, and they're mostly transactional. People don't really have control of them. At the national level, we can talk about what the stock market is doing. Locally, we might talk about average household income or home prices or employment rates or unemployment rates or poverty rates. But well-being, through some work of the Gallup organization, which is the major researchers and pollsters, over the last 20 years, they've developed something called the Well-Being Index. which takes into consideration 5 domains: physical well-being, social well-being, sense of purpose, sense of community, and financial well-being. So it doesn't eliminate the economic piece, but it really only makes it one part of that. And so in having the ability to start to measure well-being, we can begin to hopefully change the conversation, particularly change how government and business leaders look at what matters to our community. And how does well-being not just look in our 4 counties that we are taking a look at, but how does it look at all the way down to the census tract? So how's well-being in Preble County compared to West Dayton, to East Dayton, to Beaver Creek, to Centerville, up north to Miami County? And so that ability to really look at the community and ask people how they feel and get a much better understanding of how the residents of our community feel and where the gaps are. What's the difference between the well-being in Oakwood versus another part of the community like a Trotwood? So I think that we have the ability to really illuminate people in the region as to what is going on at a far more granular level, and understand where people are hurting, where they want to see things be different, and then co-create the kind of future we want to have in our community. I think that's what's so exciting about the Reimagining America Dayton, Ohio effort.
And I think that is important, like you said, that I think it's important for us to spend some time to looking at our history, because if we don't understand where we have been, we don't know where we're going. So I totally agree with that. But I like your concept, because I'm a big believer in mindset. And no matter what I think we all have had challenges over the last year due to the pandemic, but it's our mindset. What are we going to do about it? And so feeling a sense of empowerment of, I have the power to make a difference. Now, what does that look like, and how can I put that into action, is the one thing that really motivated me and inspired me as a part of your movement. But I want to ask you, what about that we talked about from people from different walks of life? What piece of advice would you give others about if they are feeling compelled to make a difference? What piece of advice would you offer them about how to go about figuring that out?
Well, I think I hate to quote Nike, but just do it. I mean, I think that's the first step, because oftentimes you feel like you can't make a difference and you talk yourself out of even getting started. So I think that's really the first step. I think that the second step is find some like-minded people and really go to work. I mean, you don't have to change the whole world overnight. You could be just doing a cleanup on your street, or helping out some folks that need helping out. I mean, I think that anything that we do is positive is gonna make a difference. But I think sometimes we talk ourselves out of something before we even get started. I tend to be pretty fearless and probably start too many things. And I mean, certainly if people don't know where to get started, we're happy to talk to folks. I mean, we don't charge for coming down to the Collaboratory. We've got, as you can see behind me, we've got a lot of whiteboard here, and we spend a lot of time with people. We're just trying to flesh out their ideas. We had another young lady that we met on one of the calls come in last week, and she's actually going to use our space next week for a 2-hour planning meeting with people that she wants to bring together to get more insight. And so we helped her sort of develop an agenda and kind of define what she wants to accomplish at the meeting. So we're really here to support people who may have an idea, may not know where to go get started. But chances are there's folks that in their own network that would get excited about working with them if they would share, here's what I want to do. Social media is I often call it anti-social media, but that's still another good place to connect with people in the community if you've got an idea that you want to try and do something. Oftentimes we want to start something new and there's somebody already doing something similar. So, kind of putting the word out on social media is another way to get plugged in with maybe somebody who's doing something similar, and you don't have to start a new project. But I think that's, have the courage of your convictions to get out there and talk to folks and just go do it.
I like that. Just do it. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but at least get started. And I'm a firm believer you will attract the people you need to attract and what you're trying to do. So that's some great advice. I wanted to ask you, what motivates you? What inspires you? I know that, you know, doing advocacy work is hard work.
Yeah, I don't know what else I'd be doing. I mean, it's just it's just second nature to me. I mean, maybe I'm addicted to new ideas, so that's probably a bad thing. But um, I just want to see other people realize their potential. I mean, we talk about the collaboratories about unleashing Dayton's potential, but I guess, I mean, in many ways, I just feel called to want to help people.
And so, and I commend you for that. I commend your work. We definitely got to have you back to talk more about your Reimagine America. I am really excited to see what that final product would look like, and what is your ultimate goal for that particular initiative?
So, I mean, we have it set out as sort of a 5-year timeline. We're organizing a hackathon. It's going to be a low tech hackathon in November before Thanksgiving, where we're asking people to come together and work on these 8 action areas that we've identified: the economy and employment, education, the environment, housing, transportation, health, justice, and media. So the next step is really to kind of create the second process, one of these conscious conversations where we're really trying to get insight into well-being. But the next step is to bring community members together. We're hoping to get about 250 people together and then break them up into 8 groups to begin to really start to think about those 8 action areas and what could be better, what could be different, what is our declaration of possibility, what's impossible that if it were possible would make a real difference in the lives of people who live in our community. And I think that's, and then working hard to reach that diverse group of people. I mean, to some extent, some of us have, whether it's the luxury or the privilege, to be able to put time into this kind of work, and other people, they're just trying to make ends meet and keep their head above water. And so trying to figure out how to hear those voices, because a lot of those folks who are struggling, they actually have a lot of good ideas about what it is. They're facing the problems every day, and they're going to be able to tell you exactly what it needs to look like here. And so, making sure we're reaching those folks, I think is really going to be important. But that's our goal. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to have at least 5,000 community members that we've touched and have been actively involved in this co-creation process. So, what does the ideal housing situation look like when affordable housing? How do we create more equity in education? For all the work that's being done at the county level, Dayton public school students are still not achieving at the rates that they should be achieving. And so how do we make a different kind of investment? What does that start to look like? I think that's where we have an opportunity to create these forums that were, again, are not being led by institutional leaders, that are really being led by citizens who don't have an agenda. And again, not that institutions are necessarily good or bad, but oftentimes the purpose of the institution becomes to perpetuate the institution, and it's really not about meeting the needs of the community members. So we envision a 5-year process where we really are looking to bring this whole notion of well-being to the forefront. There's a fairly well-known data person in this community, and every year he gives a state of the Dayton region's economy. Well, wouldn't it be great, 3 years from now, when his report would be given the state of Dayton region's well-being? And we're talking about something that is more than just what the state of the economy is. That's when you're really reaching citizens. That's when, we're really taking to their concerns into account far more than just looking at one element. We spend way too much time looking at the economics of things. And yes, having more money can be nicer than not having more money, but are you living a purposeful life? Do you feel physically well enough to do the things you want to do? Yes, I mean, are your finances okay, so you're not stressed about that? How do you feel about where your relationships? Do you have good family and friend relationships, that social well-being? How do you feel about the community you live in? All of those things ultimately determine how happy you are. Just looking at the economy is not sufficient, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when that's how we report things out. But I mean, that kind of report is going to be the norm. That's going to be what 99.5% of the communities around the country doing. I think we can be recognized nationally. I think as we continue to move this forward and we start generating some publicity, I think other communities are going to want to come to look at how we're going about trying to take ownership. And really, as Buckminster Fuller, the futurist, says, if you want change, don't spend your time fighting the existing system. Build a new model that makes the old model obsolete, and that's what we need to do. And a lot of it's about changing language. I mean, it's people, words matter, but we can't even use words honestly in this country. If you say you say socialism and they think it's soul sucking, and we don't really have anybody who's a socialist in this country. There may be some social democrats, but how's our exploitive capitalist system working for us? When you have so many people left behind, it's not really working for most of us. And I think part of it is being truthful and owning up to, yes, there's lots of good things about this country, but there's lots of things that really don't work well. And just to paper over it and say, well, this is the greatest country in the world, and if you don't like it, you can leave, doesn't lift up those folks that need to be lifted up.
Absolutely. That was well said. I want to switch gears just a little bit. I can't believe we're almost out of time, and that's why I said we have to do a part 2 to this conversation, Peter. But I wanted to ask you about, this is Father's Day weekend. This whole series is about lifting up our men and celebrating the men and the accomplishments that they have achieved. I wanted to ask you, what have you learned most about yourself, especially since the pandemic? What are some things that you learned most about yourself?
That's a hard question. I think part of it is just perseverance. I think it's perseverance and resilience, and I think that those are real. The resilience. Those are different things. I think the perseverance requires some resilience, but I think, and for a lot of folks, that's hard. It's easy to get down and to look out there and feel overwhelmed. Again, that comes back to a support system. And I think, recognizing over the last year, the people who have been on board with what we're trying to do with reimagining and some of the collaboratory projects, having that community. I think that's really at the end of the day, the social capital we have. And I think, Karen, that's really one of the differences when looking at the work that I've done and worked in Cabrini Green and working with ex-offenders and incarcerated folks, a lot of it really has to do with the community around you. Do you have a network of support and inspiration? And I use both those terms, support sort of keeping you on an even keel and inspiration lifting you up. You need both of those things. Mm-hmm. And as I look around the work, when I was working at Cabrini Green, and there's lots of stories of people who grew up there and got out. Tony Watson, this is in the early 90s, was a rear admiral in the Navy, grew up in Cabrini Green. And then you always, those folks, what was it that allowed them to get out of those circumstances? And oftentimes it was a teacher or a pastor or a sports coach or an auntie or somebody who came in and was there and made sure that they had that opportunity. But for a lot of folks, they don't, things that some of us may take for granted in terms of that network of support and inspiration just isn't there for other people. And I think that's where the community needs to step in and come alongside these folks and figure out what is it you need. We need to be here for each other. I think that's where that whole idea of shared humanity comes into play. Just hoping that people are going to figure it out on their own. It ends up costing us all in the long run.
Isn't that the truth? I can't believe we're out of time, but I want to ask you one question I always ask my guests, and then I'm going to let you have the final word, and please share your information and how people can get involved in the Collaboratory. I'll certainly put it in the comments in the bottom of the video, but I always ask someone because, throughout life we learn different lessons. But we can always look back and say, oh, if I would have known this, maybe I would have done this differently. What would you tell your younger self based on what you know
I think be true to who you are.
now?
Don't try and be don't try and be someone you're not. I think oftentimes we try and make ourselves look good in the eyes of others, and so I think ultimately, the only person you have to account to, I mean, is yourself. Were you true to who you are? Did you live up to your values? Did you try and make it a difference in some way? I think you have to fall down a few times. If you never fail, you're never going to learn anything. Just always pick yourself back up.
Back to that perseverance, never giving up. I think that's some great advice. And Peter, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us. Happy Father's Day. Hopefully you're going to get full rotten and enjoy every moment of it. You deserve it for all the hard work you do throughout the year. And what piece of advice, what's your final comments that you would leave for our listening audience?
Yeah, I think never stop reimagining. And if you've got an idea to build a better Dayton, we'd love to hear from you. You can get a hold of me, Peter, at the Dayton Collaboratory, and we're here to help. But I think everybody can make a difference.
That's right. We all can be the change that we want to see. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Peter. I look forward to continued conversations. I see us doing a series on some other topics of especially what you're talking about the well-being. I think that is so important because it means different things to different people, but being able to measure that and see how we can use that to move forward is critical. So
I'd love to formally involve your listeners, and let's find a way to get some of the folks that are in your network to be a part of that conversation.
I would love that. So let's plan to have a conversation about that.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, and God bless.
Take care.
You too. Thank you so much for being a part of Through My Lens. This is an opportunity where we sit down with movers and shakers. Their circumstances or their challenges, define who they are and what they can accomplish. And I hope you saw that today throughout our marathon of interviews of how men are really, really stepping up, making a difference, not only in their own lives, but making lives better for everyone in our community and in our world. So, thank you so much to all of the men who participated in our discussion today. As you can tell, have some dynamic men right here in Dayton, Ohio, and or who have had their beginnings right here in Dayton, Ohio. So we just thank you all. We look forward to your continued support, and we look forward to hearing more about the wonderful impact you are making on our community. Until next time, keep rising and keep shining. God bless.